This is a quick rundown of the way that I use Touch Portal in combination with Excalibur and a little bit of auto hotkey to speed up my editing workflow in Adobe Premiere. So if you're not familiar with it, Excalibur is a plugin from Knights of the Editing Table. That's a quick little plug for my AutoHotkey script HyperSearch, which you can check out in the link in the description. Anyway, Excalibur is a tool for Premiere that gives you a search bar that lets you automate a lot of commands in Premiere that you don't have commands for, and also doing macros and stuff like that. So I've combined that with Touch Portal, which also lets you do automations, in order to basically give myself a keyboard of commands instead of having to memorize a ton of different keyboard shortcuts. So essentially what a lot of these buttons do is just open the Excalibur window and type in a command and execute it. But let's start with just kind of the basics of this panel. You can see that I have kind of sectioned it off into its own little panels, and some of these have a few different layers. So over here we have the panels panel, which lets me just navigate around Premiere, because a lot of times I have a lot of different windows open, so it can be really useful to just quickly open the effect controls or the metadata panel or whatever. That I have a lot of the keyboard shortcuts memorized for the timeline and stuff like that, but for some of the more obscure ones or hard to reach on the keyboard ones, it's nice to just have a button that will jump me there. And really, again, all it's doing is pressing the shortcut for that panel. Then if I tap the title up here, it actually switches to effects, which just gives me quick access to certain effects. So for example, if I'm editing and I have a little bit of a jump cut here, I can add a morph cut to it just like that. And again, Excalibur will let you just type in morph cut and apply it, but the panel gives me access to not move my hand from my mouse and instantly apply it. And again, the way that works is I have a flow in Touch Portal, which is Unsheath Excalibur, which essentially just holds the shortcut key for Excalibur, but that way I don't have to type it in every time, and I can just do the flow whenever I need to do that. And then it pastes in the text of the effect that I want and presses enter. So again, it's really simple, but also really useful. And I also have buttons to add extra layers. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. But there, I can just add an adjustment layer without having to, I can never remember exactly what the best way to do that is through the menu. So I just have a button for that. And I guess that kind of jumps me to the track targets over here. So I can quickly just press through which tracks I want to have highlighted, audio and video 1 through 4, and then I can also add a video track, add an audio track, or clear all empty tracks if I want to. And then I do have a button for undo at the bottom here, which that's the Excalibur undo, which is important because when you're doing Excalibur stacked commands, you can't always use Control-Z in Premiere without having some weird glitching or stepping. So I have quick access to the Excalibur undo there as well. And also increment date and save, and the duplicate and increment the sequence number. And while we're over here, the other side of the track targets is the labels. So as you can see, I use label colors a lot, and I have 8 of my colors memorized on my keyboard shortcuts, but I have the 8 standard ones that I don't use quite as often mapped on here, so that I can quickly pick a clip and change the color. And that also applies to my items at the top here. And then over here, I have the track height presets. So I can set it to video if I'm doing color or something, or I can set it to be only audio, or I have 2 different sizes for kind of a standard layout. And then I also have a button to quickly set and manage my presets. So here on the other side of the track height is the source preset. So I can use that to change where my footage is going to come in. I have one set to avoid video 1 and audio 1 tracks. I have one that's only video, and then one that's kind of the standard. And at the bottom here, I have a lot of sort of miscellaneous type stuff. I have the solo and lock tracks, which is always super useful. And then if I press it again, it will actually unsolo and lock the track. And I have a few other various buttons down here as well. Most of them are just normal keyboard shortcuts, although I do have a button for add hue and saturation points, which is something that I went over in a different video, and that is an auto hotkey script that lets me add points to the major hues in Lumetri Color. And that's really useful to have that auto hotkey script mapped to a button, because it's one where the mouse position is important. So either I have to have a keyboard shortcut for it, which again, I'm trying to sort of avoid with this touch portal panel, or I can just use that button right there. And the arrows, really all the arrows do is switch between markers. Now, really one of the main things that I have on this panel that I use all the time is this transform panel. The transform is super reliant on Excalibur, and it's actually set up to Excalibur specific shortcuts. And it's important to note for this that a lot of times what I'm doing is editing interview setups that are, the primary camera is in 4K and the secondary camera is in 1080, which can be really annoying when you're using multicam. So you can see we have the 4K clip, which is really large, and the 1080 clip, which is much smaller. It's kind of inset in there. So really the way to do this if you're switching cameras is to set your second camera and then go over to your effects control panel and then set the scale to 100. So I've automated that whole process with these two buttons in Excalibur, which will do exactly what I just did. It will press the shortcut to select the camera 2, and it will set the scale to 100. But it's just a lot faster. And then same thing with camera A, it will set it back to 50%. So all I have to do is press 2, and it sets camera B, or press 1, and it sets camera 1. And then I can also change it from set to cut. So then if I press it, it will actually add that cut mark there and switch the camera. The other way to get around a jump cut is to do some kind of a punch in. And so that's where the transform section comes in. And this is useful because a lot of times if I'm working with my footage and stuff like that, I don't always have the effects control panel open, but I want to adjust the position of this and a little more than dragging around. And also other clips get in the way and all kinds of stuff. So instead, I can press this button, which will adjust the scale by 10 or 5%. And then I can also use the arrows to adjust the position of the video. And I should update this to increment by a little bit more than that, but it works for what it needs to. And then I have a few buttons that will adjust the rotation, left and right. And then there's also controls that will reset the rotation and also center the frame. And then the one in the middle, if I have a few of these transform controls applied to it, it'll reset the whole thing back to 0 and filling the frame. So that's the overview of the ways that I use Touch Portal and this huge list of commands from Excalibur to speed up my workflow in Premiere. And I hope it gives you guys some ideas on how you can speed up your own workflow. Thanks for watching.